Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Dhammapada Stories, Book 4, Story 8, Visakha. Visakha, we are told, was born in the city of Bhante in the kingdom of Anga. Her father was treasurer Dhananjaya, son of treasurer Ram, and her mother was Sumana Devi, his chief consort. When Visakha was but 7 years old, the teacher, perceiving that the Brahman, Sela, and other of his kinsmen in the faith, possessed the faculties requisite for conversion, set out with a great company of monks and came to that city. Now, at this time, householder Ram held the post of treasurer in that city, being the chief of 5 persons of great merit. The 5 persons of great merit were treasurer Ram, Chanda Paduma, his chief consort, his eldest son Dhananjaya, his wife Sumana Devi, and treasurer Ram's slave Punna. Now, treasurer Ram possessed limitless wealth, but he was not the only possessor of limitless wealth. In the country over which King Bimbisara ruled were 5 such persons: Jyotiya, Jatila, Ram, Purnaka, and Kakavaliya. When treasurer Ram learned that the possessor of the 10 powers had come to his city, he sent for the maiden Visakha, daughter of treasurer Dhananjaya, and said to her, "Dear girl, this is a happy day for you and a happy day for me. Summon the 500 maidens who are your attendants. Mount 500 chariots and accompanied by your 500 slave maidens, go forth to meet the possessor of the 10 powers." "Very well," replied Visakha, promising to do as he said. And this she did. Now, because she well knew both what was reasonable and what was unreasonable, she proceeded in her carriage as far as there was room for a carriage to go, and then, descending from her carriage, approached the teacher on foot, paid obeisance to him, and took a stand on one side. Pleased with her deportment, the teacher preached the Dhamma to her, and at the end of his discourse, both she and her 500 maidens were established in the fruit of conversion. Treasurer Ram also approached the teacher, hearkened to the Dhamma, and was established in the fruit of conversion. Thereupon, Treasurer Ram invited the teacher to be his guest on the morrow. Accordingly, on the following day he entertained in his own house the congregation of monks, presided over by the Buddha, serving them with the choicest food, both hard and soft, and in like manner during the following fortnight provided them with abundant food. When the teacher had remained in the city of Badia during his good pleasure, he departed. Now, at this time, Bimbisara and Pasenadi Kosala were connected by marriage, each having married a sister of the other. And one day, the king of Kosala thought to himself, in Bimbisara's country live 5 persons of limitless wealth, but in my country lives not a single one. Suppose I were to go to Bimbisara and ask him to let me have one of his persons of great merit. Accordingly, he went to Bimbisara, who greeted him in a friendly manner and asked him, "For what purpose have you come?" "I have come with this thought in mind. In your country live 5 persons of limitless wealth and 5 persons of great merit. I should like to take one of them back with me. These are notable families, and it is impossible for me to move them. I will not go back without one." The king took counsel with his ministers and replied, "To move notable families like that of Jyotiya would be like moving the earth itself. But there is a treasurer named Dhananjaya, son of treasurer Ram. I will take counsel with him and give you my answer later." So King Bimbisara caused treasurer Dhananjaya to be summoned and said to him, "Dear friend, the king of Kosala has said to me, I wish to take back with me a single treasurer possessed of great wealth. You go back with him. Your Majesty, if you send me, I will go." "Very well, dear friend, make your preparations and go." So treasurer Dhananjaya made the necessary preparations, and the king bestowed high honor upon him and dismissed King Pasenadi, saying, "Take him back with you." So King Pasenadi took him with him and set out for Savatthi, spending a single night on the journey. As they journeyed along, reaching a pleasant place, they pitched camp there for the night. Treasurer Dhananjaya asked the king, "Whose country is this?" "This is my country, treasurer." "How far is it from here to Savatthi?" 7 leagues. The interior of the city is crowded, and my retinue is a large one. If your Majesty, you approve, we will take up our residence right here." "Very well," replied the king, granting him request. So the king created a city for him right there and gave it to him. And having so done, departed. Because this region was first inhabited in the evening, Siam, it received the name Saketa. Now there lived at Savatthi a treasurer named Migara, And he had a son named Punyavadana, who had just reached manhood. His mother and father said to him, "Dear son, choose for yourself a wife in whatever quarter you please." "I have no use for anything of the sort." "Son, do not act in this way. A family without children cannot endure." After they had spoken to him several times, he said, "Very well, if I can find a maiden endowed with the 5 beauties, I will do so as you say." "But what are these 5 beauties, dear son?" "Beauty of hair, beauty of flesh, beauty of bone, beauty of skin, and beauty of youth. For in the case of a woman of great merit, the hair is like a peacock's tail. When it is released and allowed to fall, it touches the hem of her skirt, and then the ends of the hair curl and turn upwards. This is beauty of hair. Her lips have a color like that of a bright red gourd, and are even and soft to the touch. This is beauty of the flesh. Her teeth are white and even, and without interstices, and shine like a row of diamonds set upright, or like an evenly cut conch shell. This is beauty of bone. Her skin, without the use of sandalwood or rouge or any other cosmetic, is as smooth as a garland of water lilies, and as white as a garland of kanikara flowers. This is beauty of skin. Though she has brought forth 10 times, her youth is just as fresh, and though she had brought forth but once, this is beauty of youth. So Punyavadana's mother and father invited 108 Brahmanas to their house, entertained them at dinner, and then asked them, "Are there any women who are endowed with the 5 beauties?" "Indeed there are." "Well then, let 8 of you go in search of such a maiden," said they, giving the Brahmanas much money. "And when you return, we will do for you what is right. Go, seek out such a maiden, and when you find her, deck her with this garland." So saying, they gave the Brahmins a golden garland worth 100,000 pieces of money, and dismissed them. The Brahmins went to all the great cities and searched diligently, but finding no maiden endowed with the 5 beauties, turned back. Returning to Saketa, they reached the city on public day and thought to themselves, "Today our labors will reach a successful termination." Now in this city there is a festival celebrated every year called Public Day, and on this day families which do not ordinarily go out come forth from their houses with their attendants and with their persons unclothed, go on foot to the bank of the river. Moreover, on this day, sons of men of wealth and position, of the warrior caste, stand along the road, and when they see a beautiful maiden of equal birth, with themselves throw a wreath of flowers over her head. The Brahmins also went to the bank of the river, entered a certain hall and waited. At that moment, Visakha, who was now about 15 or 16 years of age, adorned with all her adornments, accompanied by 500 young women, came to the bank of the river, intending to bathe therein. Suddenly a storm came up, and it began to rain. Thereupon the 500 maidens ran as fast as they could and entered the hall. But in spite of the rain, Visakha proceeded at her usual gait. When she entered the hall, her garments and jewels were wet. The Brahmins perceived that she possessed 4 of the beauties. Desiring to see her teeth, they began saying to each other, "Our daughter has a slothful nature. Her husband will not get so much as sour rice gruel to eat, or we are sorely mistaken." Then said Visakha to the Brahmins, "What are you saying? We were speaking of you, dear girl. Then say that her voice was soft and resonant, like the tones of a bell." Then, with her soft, resonant voice, she asked them again, "What was the subject of your conversation?" "We were saying that while the young women who are your attendants ran as fast as they could and entered the hall without wetting their garments and their jewels, you did not quicken your pace at all. Although it was but a short distance, you had to go and entered the hall with your garments and jewels wet." Dear friends, do not speak thus. I am stronger than they are. Moreover, I had good reason for not quickening my pace. What was the reason, dear girl? Dear friends, there are 4 persons who do not appear to advantage while running. And there is another reason besides. Dear girl, which are the 4 persons that do not appear to advantage while running? Dear friends, an anointed king does not appear to advantage if, adorned with all his jewels, he girds up his loins and runs in the palace court. By so doing, he will certainly incur unfavorable criticism, and people will say of him, "Why is this great king running about like a common householder?" Likewise, the king's state elephant, when fully caparisoned, does not appear to advantage while running. But when he moves with the natural grace of an elephant, he does appear to advantage. A monk does not appear to advantage while running. By so doing, he will incur only unfavorable criticism, and people will say of him, "Why does this monk run about like a common householder?" But if he walks at a tranquil gait, he does appear to advantage. A woman does not appear to advantage while running. She will incur only unfavorable criticism, and justly so. People will say of her, "Why is this woman running about like a man?" These are the four persons that do not appear to advantage while running. But what was the other reason, dear girl? Dear friends, mothers and fathers bring up a daughter seeking to preserve intact the greater and lesser members of her body, for we are goods for sale, and they bring us up with the intention of marrying us off into some other family. The result is that were we, while running, to trip over the hem of our skirt or on the ground and fall and break either a hand or a foot, we should be a burden on our family. But if the clothes we wear get wet, they will dry. Bearing this consideration in mind, dear friends, I did not run. While Visakha was talking, the Brahmins observed the beauty of her teeth. "Such beautiful teeth as hers we have never seen," said they. And applauding her, they said, "Dear girl, only you are worthy to receive this." So saying, they threw the golden garland over her head. Then she asked them, "Dear friends, from what city do you come?" "From Savatthi, dear girl." "What is the name of the treasurer whose household you represent?" "The treasurer's name is Migara, dear girl." "What is the name of his noble son?" "Punyavadana Kumara, dear girl." "The family is of equal birth with our own," thought Visakha. So she accepted the proposal and immediately sent the following message to her father: "Let him send us a chariot. For although when she came thither she came on foot, yet from the moment when the garland was thrown over her head, it was no longer proper for her to go on foot. Daughters of noblemen travel in chariots and the like, while others enter an ordinary carriage or raise a parasol or a palmyra leaf over their heads. And if this is not to be had, take the skirt of their undergarment and throw it over their shoulder." Now her father sent her 500 chariots, and entering her chariot, she departed with her retinue. The Brahmins accompanying her. The treasurer asked the Brahmins, "Whence have you come?" "From Savatthi, great treasurer." "What is the name of the treasurer?" "The treasurer's name is Migara." "What is the name of his son?" "Punyavadana Kumara." "How great is his wealth?" 40 crores, great treasurer." "As for his wealth, it is but a farthing compared with ours. But from the time when one obtains a prefecture for his daughter, why should anything else be considered?" So saying, the treasurer gave his consent, and when he had entertained them in his house for 2 days, bestowing all manner of attentions upon them, he dismissed them. The Brahmins returned to Savatthi and reported to Treasurer Megara, "We have found a maiden. Whose daughter is she?" "The daughter of Treasurer Dhananjaya." Treasurer Megara thought to himself, "I have obtained the daughter of a notable family, and it behoves me to bring her hither with all speed." So he informed the king of his intention to go thither. The king thought to himself, "That is the distinguished family I took from King Bimbisara and settled at Saketa. I ought to show him every attention." So he said, "I will go too." "Very well, your majesty," replied Treasurer Megara. So Treasurer Megara sent the following message to Treasurer Dhananjaya: "When I come, the king will accompany me, and the king's force is a large one. Shall you be able, or shall you not be able to care for so large a company?" Treasurer Dhananjaya sent back the following reply: "If 10 kings are coming, let them come." Accordingly, Treasurer Megara took with him from that great city all of the inhabitants except so many as were required to guard the houses, and halting half a league from Saketa, sent the following message to Treasurer Dhananjaya: "We have arrived." Thereupon Treasurer Dhananjaya sent a handsome present to Treasurer Megara, and took counsel with his daughter, saying, "Dear daughter, I am informed that your father-in-law has arrived, and with him the king of Kosala. Which house shall be made ready for him, and which for the king, and which houses for the viceroys?" The treasurer's daughter possessed wisdom, and her intelligence was as keen as the edge of a diamond. As the result of the resolution she had formed, and the earnest wish she had cherished during 100,000 aeons of time, so she made the necessary arrangements, saying, "Make ready such and such a house for my father-in-law, such and such for the king, and such for the viceroys." And causing the slaves and the servants to be summoned, she apportioned to them their several duties, saying, "So many of you are to wait upon the king, and so many upon the viceroys, and so many of you as are hostless, and the like are to care for the elephants and horses and other animals, so that when our guests arrive, they may enjoy this festive occasion to the full." Why did she take it upon herself to do this? So that none might say, "We came to take part in the festivities of Visakha's marriage, but obtained no enjoyment. Instead, we spent our time looking after our horses and the like." On that very day also, Visakha's father caused 500 goldsmiths to be summoned, and said to them, "Make for my daughter a great creeper, parur." So saying, he gave them 1,000 nikas of ruddy gold, and a sufficient supply of silver, rubies, pearls, coral, and diamonds to go with it. After the king had remained a few days, he sent the following message to Treasurer Dhananjaya. The treasurer must not think of providing maintenance and support for us for long. Let him inform us when the maiden is to depart. The treasurer sent back the following message to the king. The season of the rains has now arrived. Therefore, it will be impossible for you to move for 4 months. Whatever your army requires, all this it shall be my duty to provide. The king will depart when I send him. All this it shall be my duty to provide. The king will depart when I send him. From that time on, it was like one long holiday in the city of Saketa. From the king to the humblest person, all were adorned with garlands and perfumes and rich apparel. And each thought to himself, the king is bestowing his attentions on me alone. In this manner, 3 months passed, but the parure was not yet finished. The superintendents of the work came and reported to the treasurer, nothing is lacking except that there is not sufficient wood to cook for food for the army. Friends, go, tear down all the ruined elephant stables and all the dilapidated houses in this city, and use them for firewood. They cooked food with firewood thus obtained for a fortnight, and then came back and reported, there is no more wood. All this time of year it is impossible to procure firewood. Therefore, open the storehouses where the cloths are kept. Take coarse cloths, make wicks of them, soak them in vessels of oil, and thus cook the food. And this they did for another fortnight. Thus 4 months passed, and the parure was completed. In the making of this parure, 4 pine pots of diamond were used, 11 pine pots of pearls, 22 pine pots of coral, 33 pine pots of rubies. With these and other of the 7 kinds of jewels, the parure was completed. Ordinary threads were not used in the making of this parure. The thread work was entirely of silver. It was fastened to the head and extended to the feet. In various places, seals of gold and dies of silver were attached to hold it in position. There was one seal on the crown of the head, one on the top of each ear, one at the throat, one on each knee, one at each elbow, one at the waist, and one at the small of the back. In the fabric of this parure, the goldsmiths wrought a peacock. In its right wing were 500 feathers of ruddy gold, and in its left wing 500. Its beak was of coral, its eyes were of gems, and likewise its neck and its tail feathers. The midribs of the feathers were of precious stones, and likewise its legs. When it was placed on the crown of Visakha's head, it appeared like a peacock standing on the peak of a mountain and dancing. And the sound of the midrips of the 1,000 feathers was like the music of the celestial choir, or of the 5 kinds of instruments. Only by going very close could people tell that it was not a real peacock. The materials used in the making of this parure cost 9 crores, and 100,000 pieces of money were paid for the workmanship. Through what deed in a previous state of existence did Visakha receive this parure? We are told that in the dispensation of the Buddha Kassapa, she presented 20,000 monks with bows and robes, and that she likewise gave them thread and needles and dyeing materials, all of which were her property. It was through this gift of robes that she received this parure. The gift of robes by women culminates in the great creep of parure. The gift of robes by men culminates in the reception of bows and robes supernaturally created. When in the course of 4 months the great treasurer had thus prepared a trouser for his daughter, he began giving her her dowry. He gave her 500 carts filled with money, 500 carts filled with vessels of gold, 500 filled with vessels of silver, 500 filled with copper vessels, 500 carts filled with garments made of various kinds of silk, 500 carts filled with ghee, 500 filled with rice husked and winnowed, and 500 carts filled with plows, plowshares, and other farm implements. This, we are told, was the thought that occurred to him. In the place to which my daughter is going, she must never be obliged to send to her neighbor and say, I have need of this or that. For this reason, therefore, he provided her with all these implements. Then he provided her with slave maidens, richly dressed and adorned, to wait upon her person, bringing up 500 carts and placing 3 slave maidens in each cart, and saying to them, You are to bathe her and feed her and dress her. Thus he gave her 1,500 slave maidens to wait upon her person. Then the following thought occurred to him: I will give my daughter cattle. So he gave the following order to his men: My men, go to the small cattle pen and open the gate. When you have so done, post yourselves on both sides of a lane, 3/4 of a league in length and 8 rods across, with a drum at every quarter league, and do not allow the cattle to pass beyond these limits. When you have taken up your positions, sound your drums. His men did as they were commanded. Leaving the cattle pen, they proceeded a quarter of a league and sounded the drum. Then, proceeding to the half-league point, they sounded the drum. Then proceeding to the 3/4 league point, they sounded the drum, and they guarded the means of exit along the sides. When they had so done, cattle filled an enclosure 3/4 of a league in length and 8 rods across, and stood rubbing shoulder with shoulder. Then the great treasurer ordered the gate of the cattle pen to be closed, saying, "These cattle are enough for my daughter. Close the gate." But even after the gate had been closed by the fruit of Visakha's merit, the powerful bulls and milk cows leaped over the gate and got out. In spite of all that the men could do to prevent them, 60,000 powerful bulls and 60,000 milk cows escaped. Powerful bull calves following the milk cows out of the enclosure. Through what deed in a previous state of existence did the cattle thus come forth? We are told that in the dispensation of the Buddha Kasapa, Visakha was reborn as Sangadasi, the youngest of 7 daughters of King Kiki. One day, as she was giving the 5 products of the cow to a company of 20,000 monks, the young monks and novices covered their bowls with their hands and said, "Enough, enough." But in spite of their efforts to prevent her, she continued to give, saying, "This is pleasant to the taste, this will rejoice the heart." As the result of this deed, we are told that cattle escaped in spite of all that the men could do to prevent them. After the treasurer had given all this wealth to his daughter, his wife said to him, "You have provided all else for your daughter, but you have not provided men servants and women servants to do her bidding. Why is this?" "Because I wish to find out which of them have a sincere affection for my daughter, and which of them have not. It is not my intention to seize by the neck and send with her those who do not wish to go with her. But when she has entered her carriage and is ready to start, then I will say, let those who wish to go with her go. Let those who do not wish to go with her remain behind. On the morrow my daughter will depart," thought the treasurer as he sat in his inner room. So he summoned his daughter, seated her beside him, and said to her, "Dear daughter, there are certain modes of conduct which you must observe so long as you live with your husband's family." And so saying, he gave her certain admonitions. Now Treasurer Megara happened to be sitting in the next room and heard all the admonitions which Treasurer Dhananjaya gave to his daughter. "Dear daughter, so long as you live in the house of your father-in-law, the indoor fire is not to be carried outside. The outdoor fire is not to be carried inside. Give only to him that gives. Give not to him that gives not. Give both to him that gives and to him that gives not. Sit happily, eat happily, sleep happily, tend the fire, honor the household divinities." These 10 admonitions did Treasurer Dhananjaya give to his daughter. On the following day he assembled all the guilds of artisans, and standing in the midst of the king's army, appointed 8 householders to be sponsors for his daughter, saying to them, "If in the place to which my daughter is going any fault is charged against my daughter, you are to clear her of the charge." Then he caused his daughter to put on her great creeper paruri, which cost 9 crores of treasure, and giving her 54 crores of treasure to buy aromatic powders for the bath, he assisted her to enter her carriage, and escorting her through the 14 villages round about Saketa, which paid tribute to him as far as Anuradhapura, he caused the following proclamation to be made: "Let those who wish to go with my daughter go." So soon as the inhabitants of the 14 villages heard this proclamation, they exclaimed, "Why should we remain here when our noble mistress is departing?" And they departed from those villages, leaving nothing behind them. Treasurer Dhananjaya paid his respects to the king, and treasurer Migara accompanied them a little way on their journey, and then, bidding farewell to his daughter, placed her in their charge. When treasurer Migara, seated in the last carriage in the procession, saw the army of people following, he asked, "Who are these people?" "Men servants and women servants to do your daughter-in-law's bidding." "Who can feed so many as these? Beat them with sticks and drive them back. Take along only those who will not be driven back." But Visakha protested, saying, "Hold! Do not drive them away. One army will feed the other." Said the treasurer in reply to her protests, "Dear girl, we have no need of these people. Who will feed them?" And he had them beaten with clods of earth, sticks, and the like, and driven back. And taking with him those who would not be driven back, he said, "These are enough for our purposes," and continued his journey. Now, when Visakha reached the gate of the city of Savatthi, she thought to herself, "Shall I enter the city sitting in a closed carriage, or standing up in a chariot?" Thereupon the following thought occurred to her: "If I enter the city sitting in a closed carriage, the splendor and magnificence of my great creeper paruri will be visible to none." Accordingly, she entered the city, standing up in a chariot, showing herself to all the city. When the residents of Savatthi beheld Visakha's state, they said, "This, they say, is Visakha, and a state well becomes her." Such was the splendid state in which Visakha entered the treasurer's house. On the day when Visakha entered the city of Savatthi, all the residents of the city said to themselves, "Treasurer Dhananjaya was most hospitable to us when we visited his city. Therefore, they sent presents to Visakha according to their power and ability. And all the presents which were sent to her Visakha distributed among the various families throughout the city. Give this to my mother, she would say, this to my father, this to my brother, this to my sister. Thus she accompanied every gift she sent with a kindly message to the recipient, choosing her words with reference to the age and station of each, and adopting, as it were, all the residents of the city as her kinsfolk. Now, in the middle of the night, Visakha's well-bred mare gave birth to a foal. Accordingly, Visakha went to the stable, accompanied by her female slaves, bearing torches in their hands, saw that the mare was bathed with hot water and anointed with oil, and having so done, returned to her own quarters. Now, Treasurer Megara, in planning the festivities of his son's marriage, completely ignored the Tathagata, in spite of the fact that the teacher was at that time in residence at a monastery close at hand. On the other hand, impelled by the friendly feeling which he had long cherished for the naked ascetics, he said to himself, I will render honor to my noble ascetics. So one day he ordered the finest of rice porridge to be boiled in hundreds of new vessels, invited 500 naked ascetics, escorted them into his house, and having so done, sent the following message to Visakha. Let my daughter-in-law come and render homage to the Arahats. Now Visakha had attained the fruit of conversion and was one of the noble disciples, and therefore she was pleased and delighted when she heard the word Arahats. But when she entered the hall where the naked ascetics were eating and looked at them, she said, men like these are totally bereft of sense of modesty and fear of mortal sin, and have no right to the title Arahats. Why did my father-in-law send for me to come? And approaching the treasurer, she returned to her own quarters. When the naked ascetics saw Visakha, they all reproached the treasurer with one accord, saying, Householder, why did you not seek some other maiden to be the wife of your son? In admitting a female lay disciple of the monk Gautama to your house, you have admitted a Jonah of Jonas. Expel her from this house immediately. But Treasurer Megara thought to himself, it is impossible for me to expel her from my house on the mere say-so of these ascetics. She is the daughter of a great house. Accordingly, he said to the naked ascetics, Noble ascetics, young women are likely to do all sorts of things, whether knowingly or unknowingly. Hold your peace. So saying, he dismissed them. Having so done, he seated himself on a costly seat and began to eat rich rice porridge flavored with honey out of a golden dish. At this time a monk, who was a pellet faller, going his round for alms, entered the treasurer's residence. Visakha stood fanning her father-in-law when she saw the monk, thinking to herself, it would not be proper for me to announce this monk to my father-in-law. She stepped aside that her father-in-law might see the elder. But the simpleton, although he saw the elder, pretended not to see him, and with bowed head continued to eat his meal. Visakha perceived within herself, although my father-in-law sees the elder, yet he makes no sign. Accordingly she said to the elder, pass on, reverend sir. My father-in-law is eating stale fare. Now, although Treasurer Megara had resisted the importunities of the naked ascetics, yet when, as he sat there, he heard her say, he is eating stale fare, he removed his hand from the dish and said, take away this rice porridge and expel the woman from this house. To think that at the time of festivity she should accuse such a man as I am of eating unclean food. But in this house all the slaves and servants belong to Visakha. Who therefore would take hold of her hands and her feet? There was no one who dared even open his mouth. Visakha, hearing the words which her father-in-law had uttered, said, dear father-in-law, this is no sufficient reason why I should leave your house. It is not as if I were a common wench brought hither by you from some bathing place on a river. Daughters who have mothers and fathers living do not leave the house of their father-in-law for any such reason as this. Indeed, for this very reason, when I set out to come hither, my father summoned 8 householders and placed me in their hands and said, if any fault is charged against my daughter, you are to clear her on the charge. Send therefore for my sponsors, and let them clear me of the charge. What she says is right, said the treasurer. Accordingly he summoned the 8 householders and said to them, at a time of festivity, while I was sitting and eating rich rice porridge out of a golden dish, this young woman said that I was eating unclean food. Convict her of this charge and expel her from this house. Is what he says true, dear girl? I did not say precisely that. What happened was this. A certain monk, going his round for alms, stopped at the door of the house, and my father-in-law, who at the time was eating rich rice porridge flavored with honey, completely ignored him. I thought to myself, my father-in-law is acquiring no fresh merit in this present state of existence, but is consuming only stale merit. So I said to the elder, pass on, reverend sir. My father-in-law is eating stale fare. What fault is to be found with me for so doing? None at all. What our daughter said was entirely proper. Why should you get angry with her? Noble sirs, I grant that there is no fault to be found with her for this. But on a certain occasion, in the middle watch of the night, she went behind the house, accompanied by her slaves, both male and female. Is what he says true, dear girl? Dear friends, my reason for going was no other than this. My full-blooded mare had given birth to a foal in the stable attached to the house. I thought to myself, it is not right that I should sit here and make no sign. So I ordered my slaves to procure torches, and accompanied by my slaves, both male and female, I went to the stable and saw to it that proper care was given to the mare. Noble sir, our daughter does not work in your house, which is not fit even for female slaves to do.